What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Today I'm going to talk about another West Virginia ghost story, but this one is going to be a Wetzel County West Virginia ghost story. I'm the Best Virginian. Usually I cover West Virginia history and travel videos. I delve a little bit into the true crime and mysteries, but today I'm going to talk about another West Virginia ghost story. This one, like many before, comes from Coffin Hollow and Other Ghost Tales by Ruth Ann Music. If you have any interest in West Virginia ghost stories or folklore, I would definitely recommend picking up a copy of this book. And like I said before, this story takes place in the booming metropolis of Mobley, West Virginia, which is in Wetzel County. For those of you who don't know or have not been around the channel for a super long time, typically when I talk about Wetzel County, it has something to do with unsolved murders, mysterious deaths, because that's probably what Wetzel County is most well known for. And of course, this ghost story involves four mysterious deaths. So like always, I'm just going to poorly retell the story, and then we're going to dive a little bit into the actual history behind the ghost story itself. So our story begins in Mobley, West Virginia, during the big oil boom of the early 1900s. The son of a farmer was working and somehow mortally wounded himself with a pitchfork. Now, eventually, an oil worker came upon this scene and found this child dead, and decided that the best course of action would be to pick up this bloody pitchfork to make sure it wasn't like contaminated in any way. Shortly after that, 4 individuals who were friends of this kid's father came along and saw the kid, saw the oil worker and the blood-soaked pitchfork, and quickly accused him of murdering this child. Now, some Wetzel County hijinks ensued, and basically they grabbed the oilman and decided that they were going to kill him right there on the spot by hanging. When they asked the oilman if he had any last words, he basically spit in their faces and said that if you kill me in this manner, I will make sure each and every one of you die in the exact same way. Not gonna lie, kind of a baller move. Now, within a couple of days, one of the oilman's murderers was thrown over a cliff. He was actually ejected off of a horse and buggy, and as he was falling off this embankment, was able to grab some tree branches with his neck. First of all, I don't think that's in the exact same manner that the oilman was killed. A few days later, another one of the oilman's murderers seemingly tripped into some ropes in his barn that he used to hoist hay bales from the first floor up to the second floor, and ended up strangling himself in these ropes. And if you're starting to think that this sounds a little bit like Final Destination, yeah, it's basically Final Destination. Now, the third of the oilman's murderers was actually killed in an accident involving a wire chain actually getting wrapped around his neck, which I've seen enough OSHA training videos to know that if an industrial chain gets wrapped around your neck, you're probably not gonna die of strangulation. It's probably gonna be like a... The last individual connected to the oilman's death was actually found hanging in his kitchen. Riddled with guilt and paranoia, he decided to end his own life, and thus every single individual involved with this oilman's murder did die mostly in a similar fashion. A couple of those guys definitely dead by decapitation, but 2 of them, now, we'll never know how much of the story is true or based off of real events, but we can dive a little bit into the history that is mentioned in this story. Like I said when we first got started, I'm from Wetzel County, and it's kind of a weird place. Like, geographically, it's the first county south of the Mason-Dixon line in West Virginia, which makes it the northernmost southern county in the southernmost northern state in America. Want to get weirder? West Virginia is the only mid-Atlantic state that doesn't touch the ocean. But if you've watched this channel long enough, you probably know that Wetzel County is often associated with unsolved murders and just mysterious crimes in general. For example, if you've ever done research into like obscure, lesser known like serial killers, you may have stumbled upon the Redhead Murders. Now, many people suspect the first victim of the serial killer was the Littleton Jane Doe of Wetzel County. And later on in the 90s, you had what was known as the Good Farm Murder. I did a whole video on it. Basically, this case was picked up and talked about by the hit TV show Unsolved Mysteries. If you've ever gone back and watched any of those old episodes of Unsolved Mysteries, you probably didn't know that the best Virginian's hometown is mentioned in one of those episodes. Basically, guy killed his business partner and then moved into the guy's house while the dude was just rotting in his basement. Wetzel County gets weird. Like, for most people, that would be an absolute crazy, like, once-in-a-lifetime event. In Wetzel County, that's like a Tuesday. In fact, if you go all the way back and look at the first major historical event in Wetzel County after separation from the state of Virginia, it is the murder of one John Jennings, which was never solved. Basically, the Jennings gang was a group of not-so-great highwaymen that essentially everyone kind of thought the father was actually the ringleader of this gang. So a bunch of vigilantes actually broke into John Jennings' house. At some point during the struggle, his wife attempted to throw him an axe so he could defend himself, and this group of vigilantes actually opened fire on John Jennings and his wife, killing John instantly and severely injuring his wife. Again, did an entire video about it that you can watch after this one if you really want to get a deep dive into the weirdness of Wetzel County history. Yeah, Wetzel County kind of has some more mainstream references to its history of unsolved murders. It has historical accounts of its unsolved murders, and now it almost would seem like it's starting to go into folklore. Now, the other thing that we can talk about is the history surrounding the oil and gas boom of the early 1900s. There are several small towns in Wetzel, Tyler, Doddridge, and Ritchie counties that were put on the map almost entirely due to the oil and gas booms around this time. But before we can talk about that, we need to talk about Burning Springs. Not Burning Springs, West Virginia, the town, but just the natural geological phenomena of Burning Springs. There are places across West Virginia that if you light a candle and stick them into these naturally occurring rock formations, you can ignite naturally leaking gas that seeps out through these rocks. These are known as burning springs. And generally, it was accepted that if you could find a burning spring, you could probably mine for salt pretty close to it. So in the 1840s, this family known as the Rathbones, not sure if that's a tragic last name or an amazing euphemism, settled and started drilling for salt in the town of Burning Springs, West Virginia, and they ended up striking oil, which at the time wasn't as valuable as salt for like the longest time, for the longest period of human history. Salt was actually super valuable. If you wanted to preserve food, you needed salt. So if you've ever heard someone say like they're not worth their salt, that's a saying that goes back centuries, because for a long time, salt was very important to civilizations. Super early on in this time period, when they were trying to drill for salt, oil wasn't that valuable. It was actually seen more of a nuisance. So anytime they'd hit oil, they would just dump it into either the Ohio River or some of its tributaries, which caused the Ohio River to get the nickname the Old Greasy. But in the 1860s, with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, with the demand of oil going up and up and up, many towns started popping up because of these big oil booms. One of them was the town of Volcano, West Virginia. The town actually got its name because oil and gas flares were so common, they would illuminate the sky and give it like an other earthly glow, especially at night. This is also the town where the infinite wire pumping method was invented that allowed multiple wells to run and be pumped from a single engine. Ironically, the town that got its name and was well known for these oil and gas flare-ups burned to the ground in the 1870s and was never rebuilt. Now, another one of these towns is Sistersville, West Virginia. It's one of those little Ohio River towns that if you drive through, just looking at the size and the age of some of the houses, know that at one point this area had a lot of money. And again, a lot of this has to do with the Ohio River Valley oil and gas boom of the early 1900s. The town was originally settled by the Well sisters, and the first oil well was drilled here in the 1890s. It rained for nearly an entire year before it hit oil. When drilling began, the village only had a population of around 300. After the discovery of oil, the population swelled to nearly 15,000. By comparison, Tyler County, where Sistersville is located, the entire county today has a population of only about 8,000 people. So at one point, the population was almost double, and that has almost entirely to do with the oil and gas boom of the early 1900s. Now, the number of oil derricks also quickly rose. At one point, it was estimated that Sistersville was home to nearly 2,500 wells, and today there is still one that you can visit called the Little Sister Oil Well. And don't let the name fool you. It stands at around 80 feet tall. Originally drilled in 1911 and was able to reach a depth of about 1,481 feet. And it was able to produce oil for many, many years. Sistersville is also home to the West Virginia Oil and Gas Festival that is held annually in downtown Sistersville, West Virginia. So if you're ever in the area, really if you're ever in Wetzel, Tyler, Ritchie, or Doddridge counties, there's a lot of great places you can visit to learn about some of West Virginia's natural resource history. So I hope you learned something today. If you did, leave a like, share the videos. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. I try to put out videos like this whenever possible. Again, due to it being October, I like doing some of these ghost stories and talking about the history involved in them. It allows me to talk about topics and histories that I don't really have an opportunity to ever do an entire video about. So it's a great opportunity to get some of these little tidbits of history that I am kind of dying to share with y'all out there. So I hope you learned something. Again, stay wild, stay wonderful, and I'll talk to you later.